My days had found their rhythm in the 5 years since Robert passed. Every morning at 5 o'clock sharp, I'd wake without an alarm, my body trained by decades of early rises. The house would be silent except for the grandfather clock Robert bought for our 25th anniversary. Its steady ticking a reminder that time moves forward, whether we're ready or not. I'd make my coffee in Robert's favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle from when he dropped it rushing to a job site in 1987. That small imperfection made it perfect, just like our life together had been. The kitchen window faced east, and I'd watch the sunrise paint the sky while reviewing business reports spread across the same oak table where my children once did homework. 3 mornings a week, I'd drive to the office, arriving before anyone else. I love those quiet moments in the building Robert and I designed together, walking through hallways lined with photographs of every project we'd completed. My office still smelled faintly of his cologne, though I knew that was probably my imagination. Tuesdays meant lunch with my daughter Sarah at the small cafe downtown. She'd update me on her psychology practice, and I'd share whatever family gossip I'd gathered. She always ordered the Caesar salad, I always got the soup of the day, and we'd split a piece of chocolate cake while plotting birthday surprises for the grandchildren. Sarah would tease me about working too much, and I'd remind her that the business was my connection to her father, my way of keeping his dreams alive. Thursday afternoons belonged to my granddaughter Emma. At 12, she was the only one who'd inherited my love for baking. Together, we'd make apple pies, dinner rolls, and her favorite chocolate chip cookies. She'd tell me about school drama, while her hands learned to crimp pie crusts just right. "Grandma, why does Mom never cook like this?" she'd ask, and I'd smile, remembering asking my own grandmother the same question. Those kitchen sessions were about more than recipes. They were about passing down traditions, creating memories that would outlast me. Sundays were sacred. By 7 in the morning, I'd have 2 turkeys in the oven and 3 pots simmering on the stove. The dining room table, which could extend to seat 24, would be set with the china Robert's mother gave us for our wedding. Fresh flowers from my garden would center the table, usually roses or whatever was blooming that season. By noon, cars would start filling the driveway. Michael would arrive first with his twin boys, always hungry, always loud, always making me laugh. Sarah would bring homemade bread and her famous green beans. David and Jennifer would arrive last, usually around 1 o'clock, Jennifer's perfume announcing their presence before they'd even ring the doorbell. The house would fill with voices, laughter, and the occasional argument over football games. I'd watch from the kitchen doorway sometimes, seeing Robert, in Michael's gestures, my mother and Sarah's laugh, wondering if they knew how much these moments meant to me. This was what we'd built everything for, this noisy, chaotic, beautiful proof that love creates families that endure. This was my normal. This was my peace. This was what Jennifer would soon try to steal. My days had found their rhythm in the 5 years since Robert passed. Every morning at 5 o'clock sharp, I'd wake without an alarm, my body trained by decades of early rises. The house would be silent except for the grandfather clock Robert bought for our 25th anniversary, its steady ticking a reminder that time moves forward, whether we're ready or not. I'd make my coffee in Robert's favorite mug, the one with the chip on the handle from when he dropped it rushing to a job site in 1987. That small imperfection made it perfect, just like our life together had been. The kitchen window faced east, and I'd watch the sunrise paint the sky while reviewing business reports spread across the same oak table where my children once did homework. 3 mornings a week, I'd drive to the office, arriving before anyone else. I love those quiet moments in the building Robert and I designed together, walking through hallways lined with photographs of every project we'd completed. My office still smelled faintly of his cologne, though I knew that was probably my imagination. Tuesdays meant lunch with my daughter Sarah at the small cafe downtown. She'd update me on her psychology practice, and I'd share whatever family gossip I'd gathered. She always ordered the Caesar salad, I always got the soup of the day, and we'd split a piece of chocolate cake while plotting birthday surprises for the grandchildren. Sarah would tease me about working too much, and I'd remind her that the business was my connection to her father, my way of keeping his dreams alive. Thursday afternoons belonged to my granddaughter, Emma. At 12, she was the only one who'd inherited my love for baking. Together, we'd make apple pies, dinner rolls, and her favorite chocolate chip cookies. She'd tell me about school drama while her hands learned to crimp pie crusts just right. "Grandma, why does Mom never cook like this?" she'd ask, and I'd smile, remembering asking my own grandmother the same question. Those kitchen sessions were about more than recipes. They were about passing down traditions, creating memories that would outlast me. Sundays were sacred. By 7 in the morning, I'd have 2 turkeys in the oven and 3 pots simmering on the stove. The dining room table, which could extend to seat 24, would be set with the china Robert's mother gave us for our wedding. Fresh flowers from my garden would center the table, usually roses or whatever was blooming that season. By noon, cars would start filling the driveway. Michael would arrive first with his twin boys, always hungry, always loud, always making me laugh. Sarah would bring homemade bread and her famous green beans. David and Jennifer would arrive last, usually around 1 o'clock, Jennifer's perfume announcing their presence before they'd even ring the doorbell. The house would fill with voices, laughter, and the occasional argument over football games. I'd watch from the kitchen doorway sometimes, seeing Robert and Michael's gestures, my mother and Sarah's laugh, wondering if they knew how much these moments meant to me. This was what we'd built everything for, this noisy, chaotic, beautiful proof that love creates families that endure. This was my normal. This was my peace. This was what Jennifer would soon try to steal. The first sign that something was wrong came on an ordinary Wednesday morning in April. I'd arrived at the office early as usual, ready to review the contracts for the new medical center project. But when I opened my filing cabinet, the one I'd organized the same way for 30 years, everything was different. The Davidson project files were where the Mitchell accounts should be. The tax documents from 2019 were mixed with current payroll records. My sticky notes, the ones I used to mark important deadlines, had been removed and stacked neatly on my desk like someone was trying to tell me they weren't needed anymore. "Oh, Margaret, I hope you don't mind." Jennifer's voice startled me from the doorway. I hadn't heard her come in. She wore one of her designer suits, the kind that cost more than some of our workers made in a month, her smile perfectly painted but not reaching her eyes. "David asked me to help modernize the filing system. You know, digitize things, make them more accessible." She walked into my office without invitation, her heels clicking against the hardwood floor Robert had installed himself. The way she said modernize made it sound like I'd been running things with stone tablets and chisels. I watched her manicured fingers trail along my desk, touching things with a familiarity that made my skin crawl. This was my space, my sanctuary, and she moved through it like she already owned it. "I've been managing these files just fine for longer than you've been alive," I said, keeping my voice steady, though something cold was settling in my stomach. Jennifer laughed, that tinkling sound she made when she thought someone had said something quaint. "Of course you have, Margaret, but times are changing. We need to think about the future." She picked up the photo of Robert and me at the groundbreaking of our first major project, studied it like she was appraising its value. "David's been worried about you handling all this stress alone. We just want to help." David worried about me? My son, who hadn't visited the office in 6 months unless he needed a check signed? The same David who forgot my birthday last year but never missed one of Jennifer's boutique openings? I wanted to challenge her, but something in her eyes warned me to be careful. This wasn't casual help, this was reconnaissance. Over the next few weeks, Jennifer's help became more intrusive. She'd appear at the office during my usual hours, asking questions about our banking procedures, our client contracts, the property deeds, just trying to understand the family business better, she'd say with that same calculated smile. She started requesting copies of financial statements, claiming she wanted to learn from the best. She'd sit in my office while I worked, typing on her laptop, occasionally asking about specific accounts or assets with an interest that felt more like interrogation. The strangest part was how she'd phrase things. "When you're no longer able to manage everything," instead of "if." The transition period, like it was already planned. David's inheritance, when Robert's will had divided things equally among all 3 children. Each comment was a small needle, individually harmless but collectively forming a pattern I couldn't ignore. My instincts, honed by 40 years in business, screamed that something was wrong. But this was family. Surely I was misreading the situation. I spent the next 3 weeks convincing myself I was becoming a paranoid old woman. Lying awake at 3 in the morning, I'd stare at Robert's side of the bed and whisper into the darkness. I'm seeing shadows where there's only light, aren't I? The silence that answered felt like agreement. After all, Jennifer had been part of our family for 8 years. She'd stood in my living room in a white dress that cost more than our first house, promising to love David forever. I'd held her hand when she miscarried their first baby, crying with her in the hospital room while David paced the hallway. This was the woman who sent me Mother's Day cards calling me the mother she'd always wished for. Just last Christmas, she'd given me a beautiful scarf with a note that said, "To the strongest woman I know." How could I suspect her of anything malicious? The guilt ate at me during Sunday dinners as I watched her help serve the meal, laugh at Michael's jokes, and wipe chocolate from her children's faces with such maternal tenderness. I'm 78 years old, I told my reflection one morning, though I was actually 68. Even that mistake seemed like proof that maybe I was slipping. Maybe it's time to let go a little. The business had consumed my life for 4 decades. Perhaps Jennifer's interest was genuine concern, a daughter-in-law trying to ease her aging mother-in-law's burden. Other women my age were taking cruises, joining book clubs, learning to paint watercolors at the community center. Why was I clinging so hard to control? When Jennifer suggested I should enjoy life more and reduce my office visits to once a week, I found myself nodding. "You've earned the right to rest, Margaret," she said over coffee in my kitchen, reaching across to squeeze my hand. Her touch was warm, her expression seemingly sincere. "David and I can handle the day-to-day operations. You should be spending time with your grandchildren, not buried in paperwork." The logic seemed sound. My knees hurt more each winter. I'd forgotten where I put my reading glasses twice last week. Maybe I had been holding on too tightly to something that needed younger hands. When David came by that evening, unusual for a weeknight to echo Jennifer's concerns, I felt my resistance crumble. "Mom, you built an empire," he said, sitting in his father's old chair. "Now let us help you protect it." I agreed to step back, to come to the office just on Wednesdays, to let them handle the stressful daily decisions. The relief on David's face seemed genuine, and for a moment I felt foolish for doubting them. This was my son, the boy who'd brought me dandelions every spring, who'd written his college entrance essay about how his mother was his hero. If he said they wanted to help, then they wanted to help. That night, I boxed up some personal items from my office, leaving space for Jennifer's things. I even felt a small sense of freedom, imagining mornings without spreadsheets, afternoons without contractor disputes. "Maybe this is healthy," I told Robert's photograph. "Maybe I've been afraid of letting go because letting go means admitting you're really gone." How wrong I was. How dangerously, foolishly wrong. The discovery that shattered my denial came 3 weeks later, on a Thursday afternoon when I wasn't supposed to be anywhere near the office. Emma had canceled our baking session due to a school field trip, and I decided to stop by the office to retrieve my mother's recipe book, which I'd left in my desk drawer. I used my key quietly, not wanting to disturb anyone, planning to slip in and out unnoticed. The building was mostly empty, just the sound of the air conditioning and distant typing from the accounting department. David's office door was slightly open, unusual since he always kept it locked. I walked past, then stopped. Something made me turn back. Maybe it was Mother's intuition, or maybe it was the 40 years of business instinct that had kept our company alive through 3 recessions. I pushed the door open and saw his desk covered in documents, left out like he'd stepped away mid-task. My name jumped out from every page. My hands trembled as I picked up the folder marked Power of Attorney M. Thompson. The date was from 2 weeks ago. There was my signature at the bottom of each page, except it wasn't. I knew my own handwriting like I knew my children's faces. This was close. Very close, but the M was too narrow, the T too tall. Someone had practiced, studied my signature, but hadn't quite perfected it. Page after page transferred my decision-making power to David and Jennifer, effective in 30 days. I couldn't breathe. The room spun slightly as I pulled out my phone, my fingers shaking so badly it took 3 tries to open the camera. I photographed every page, every forged signature, every paragraph that stripped away my life's work. There were medical forms too, papers declaring me mentally evaluated, though I'd never seen any doctor for such tests. The letterhead was from a clinic I'd never heard of, the physician's signature as foreign as the diagnosis of mild cognitive decline and recommended supervision for financial decisions. Behind the main folder was another set of documents. These were drafts, practice sheets where someone had traced my signature over and over, each attempt getting closer to the real thing. Jennifer's handwriting was in the margins, notes like, "Loop the G more," and "Margaret presses harder on downstrokes." She'd studied me like a specimen, reduced my identity to pen strokes that could be replicated and used against me. The final document made me sink into David's chair. It was a contract with Sunset Manor, the assisted living facility on the outskirts of town. The deposit had been paid, the room selected. The move-in date was 40 days away, 10 days after the power of attorney would take effect. They'd planned every detail, timed every step. They weren't just taking my business, they were erasing my independence, my freedom, my life as I knew it. I heard footsteps in the hallway and quickly photographed the last pages. My heart pounded as I returned everything exactly as I'd found it, even remembering to leave the door slightly ajar. And I walked to my old office on legs that felt like water, grabbed the recipe book with hands that wouldn't stop shaking, and somehow made it to my car. I sat in the parking lot for 20 minutes, staring at the building Robert and I had built, wondering how my own son could do this. The evidence was undeniable. The betrayal was real. The war had already begun, and I hadn't even known I was under attack. I couldn't wait. The evidence burned in my phone like a living thing demanding action. That evening, after Jennifer left to attend her book club, I drove to David's house. He was in his study working on his laptop, looking so much like his father in his reading glasses that my heart broke before I even spoke. "We need to talk," I said, closing the door behind me. I placed my phone on his desk, the photographed documents open on the screen. "Explain this." The color drained from his face. He removed his glasses slowly, rubbing his eyes like he could erase what was happening. For a moment, I saw my little boy again, the one who'd been caught stealing cookies, preparing his defense. But when he looked up, his eyes were cold, resolved. "Mom, you're getting older. Someone needs to protect what Dad built." "What your father built?" The words came out as a whisper. "David, I mixed concrete while pregnant with you. I negotiated our first $1 million contract while your father was in the hospital with pneumonia. I kept this company alive through his cancer, through his death, through everything." My voice grew stronger with each word. "And you dare tell me someone needs to protect what he built?" David stood, pacing to the window, his back to me. "Jennifer's right. You're stuck in the past. The business needs modern leadership, fresh perspectives. You still keep paper records, for God's sake. You don't understand cryptocurrency or digital marketing or international expansion opportunities." He turned to face me, and I didn't recognize the man wearing my son's face. "We're doing this for the family's future." "Jennifer's right?" I laughed, but it sounded like breaking glass. "When did your wife's opinion matter more than 40 years of my blood and sweat? When did her 2-year community college business certificate outweigh my 4 decades of actual experience?" I stood, my legs surprisingly steady now. "Tell me the truth, David. All of it." He slumped against his desk, suddenly looking older than his 38 years. "She's been planning this for months, maybe longer. She says you're showing signs of decline, that you've been making bad business decisions. She's documented every time you've forgotten something, every moment you've seemed confused. She's convinced me, Mom, convinced me that if we don't act now, you'll run everything into the ground." "And you believed her? Your wife of 8 years over the mother who sacrificed everything for you?" The pain in my chest felt like a physical wound. "I paid for your law school by taking night shifts at the hospital. I missed my own mother's funeral because you had bar exams and needed me to watch your children. I gave you everything, David, and this is how you repay me. It's not about repayment. He slammed his hand on the desk, showing emotion for the first time. It's about facing reality. Jennifer sees what I've been too sentimental to admit. You're old, Mom. The world has moved on. Your time running things is over. He paused, his voice softening with false compassion. The facility we've chosen is beautiful. You'll be comfortable, cared for. You can finally rest. Rest? I picked up my phone, my hands steady now with rage. I'll rest when I'm dead, David. And maybe not even then, because I'll be too busy haunting you for this betrayal. I walked to the door, then turned back. Your father would be ashamed of you. But worse than that, son, you should be ashamed of yourself. The next 3 days revealed a web of deception that reached into every corner of my family. I became a detective in my own life, following threads that led to increasingly devastating discoveries. Sarah called me crying on Tuesday morning. Mom, Jennifer's been telling everyone at Sunday dinners that you've been repeating stories, forgetting grandchildren's names. She pulled me aside last week with this concerned face, saying she caught you trying to pay bills twice. Sarah's voice broke. I defended you, but she had dates, specific examples. She's been keeping a log, Mom, an actual journal documenting your supposed decline. Michael confirmed worse news when I met him for lunch. She's been talking to the employees, Mom, suggesting you've been making risky decisions, that you almost lost the Henderson contract because you forgot a meeting. He pushed his sandwich away, untouched. The foreman told me she's been promising promotions once she and David take over. She's building alliances, turning your own workers against you. The conspiracy went deeper than family manipulation. I discovered Jennifer had opened business credit lines using forged documents, accumulating over $300,000 in debt that would become visible only after the power of attorney took effect. She'd been meeting with competitors, discussing potential sales of our equipment yards. Through a friend at the bank, I learned she'd attempted to access my personal investment accounts, only failing because Robert had required dual signatures that needed both death certificates to change. Most heartbreaking was what she'd done with my grandchildren. Emma tearfully confessed that Aunt Jenny had been telling the children that Grandma was sick in her mind, that she might say confusing things or make promises she couldn't keep. She said we should be patient with you because old people get confused. Emma sobbed in my arms. She made us practice what to say if anyone asked about your health. I'm sorry, Grandma. I knew it was wrong, but she said it was to protect you. Jennifer had even reached out to my doctor's office, posing as a concerned family member requesting my medical records. She'd scheduled consultations with elder law attorneys, using carefully edited recordings of normal conversations to build her case. I'd mentioned being tired after a long day. That became evidence of declining stamina. I'd searched for my glasses that were on my head, documented as memory failure. Every human moment of the last year had been weaponized against me. The financial devastation she planned was surgical in its precision. The business would be stripped of assets within 6 months, sold piece by piece to competitors who'd already expressed interest. The family home, worth $2 million, would be sold to developers she'd been secretly negotiating with. My personal accounts would be drained for care expenses at the facility. She'd even researched how long elderly people typically lived after entering assisted care, calculating her profits against my expected lifespan. But the document that broke my heart completely was an email between Jennifer and her sister, accidentally left in the printer at David's office. The old witch has maybe 5 years left, Jennifer had written. We just need to keep David convinced until everything's transferred. Then divorce and walk away with half of everything, $15 million at least, maybe 20 if the property values keep rising. My son wasn't just betraying me. He was being betrayed too blind to see it. That night, I broke completely. I made it home, locked every door, closed every curtain, and collapsed on my bedroom floor. The sobs came from somewhere deep, somewhere I hadn't accessed since the day Robert died. But this was worse. Death was honest, final, without betrayal. This was my living son choosing greed over love. My family dismantled by someone I'd welcomed at my table. My grandchildren turned into weapons against me. I crawled to my closet, pulling out the box of photographs I kept on the top shelf. David's first birthday, his tiny face covered in chocolate cake, his college graduation, my tears of pride barely dry when the photo was taken. His wedding day, when he'd pulled me aside and whispered, "Thank you for everything, Mom. I promise I'll make you proud." Every picture was a lie now, every memory tainted. I threw them across the room, watching our smiling faces scatter like autumn leaves. The physical pain was real. My chest felt crushed, each breath a conscious effort. I understood now why they called it heartbreak. I could feel mine fracturing, pieces of it dying with each revelation. 43 years of sacrifice had led to this moment, alone on my bedroom floor, betrayed by the child I'd given everything to protect. I'd chosen overtime instead of vacations, business meetings instead of spa days, building something to leave behind instead of living for myself. "Why didn't you take me with you, Robert?" I screamed at his photograph on our dresser. "Why did you leave me here to face this alone?" I remembered his last words, making me promise to keep the family together. "I failed you," I whispered. "I failed everything we built. I raised a son who could do this. That's on me." The memories came flooding back, each one cutting deeper than the last. Teaching David to ride his bike in our driveway, running beside him, promising I wouldn't let go, then watching him pedal away on his own, sitting in emergency rooms with him through broken bones and high fevers, singing the silly songs that made him laugh through the pain, the birthday parties where I'd stayed up all night decorating, exhausted but thrilled to see his face light up. Every sacrifice felt like a mockery now. I found our wedding album and traced Robert's young face. We'd started with nothing but love and determination. Now I had everything but him, and it was all about to be stolen by our own son. "You always said I was the strong one," I told his image, "but I'm not strong enough for this. I don't know how to fight my own child." The boy who'd brought me dandelions was going to lock me away. The daughter-in-law who'd cried in my arms was counting down to my death. 3 in the morning found me still on the floor, photographs scattered around me like evidence of a life that no longer made sense. I considered letting them win. Maybe a quiet room in a facility would be better than this pain. Maybe forgetting would be a blessing. Maybe I was old, useless, everything Jennifer claimed. The business would die, but at least I wouldn't have to watch. I could disappear into wherever forgotten mothers go, taking my broken heart with me. The grandfather clock chimed, pulling me from my spiral. Dawn was coming whether I was ready or not. The sun rose anyway. Light crept through my bedroom curtains, falling across the scattered photographs, illuminating my wedding ring that had never left my finger in 46 years. I lay there among the ruins of my memories, watching dust particles dance in the morning beam, when Robert's voice came to me as clear as if he stood in the room. "You don't quit, Maggie. Winners get knocked down. Champions get back up." He'd said those words when we'd lost our first big contract to a competitor who'd undercut us by thousands. When the bank threatened foreclosure in year 3. When I'd wanted to close the business during his cancer treatments. Each time, we'd gotten back up. Each time we'd fought harder, and we'd won. I stood slowly, my knees protesting, my back aching from the night on the floor, but I stood. I walked to the bathroom and faced myself in the mirror. My eyes were swollen from crying, my hair wild, my face etched with grief. But behind the devastation, I saw something else. The 25-year-old who'd told her parents she was marrying a construction worker despite their objections. The 30-year-old who'd delivered her first project presentation to a room full of men who'd laughed until they saw her numbers. The 50-year-old who'd kept the business profitable while nursing her dying husband. That woman was still in there, and she was furious. "Jennifer thinks I'm weak because I'm old," I said to my reflection. "She thinks kindness is weakness, that love makes you vulnerable." She doesn't understand that I've survived everything life could throw at me. I've buried parents, a husband, 2 miscarriages, and a brother. I've built an empire from nothing, raised 3 children alone for half their lives, and kept 43 families employed through every economic disaster of the last 4 decades. My voice grew stronger with each word. I'm not weak. I'm just selective about my battles. And this one's worth fighting. I showered, dressed in my best business suit, the navy one Robert had bought me for our 35th anniversary. I applied makeup carefully, covering the evidence of my breakdown. Then I picked up every photograph from the floor, but instead of returning them to their box, I placed them on my dresser where I could see them, not as reminders of betrayal, but as evidence of what I was fighting for. The family Jennifer was trying to steal wasn't just David. It was Michael and Sarah, who defended me. It was Emma and the other grandchildren who deserved to know their grandmother's truth. At exactly 8 o'clock, I called Thomas Mitchell. We'd known each other for 30 years, ever since he'd handled Robert's first lawsuit against a client who wouldn't pay. He was the best lawyer in the state, semi-retired now, but he answered on the second ring. "Margaret, it's been too long. Thomas, I need your help. My family is trying to destroy me, and I need to destroy them first. Well, not destroy, save. I need to save them from themselves and from a woman who's fooled us all." There was a pause, then his voice came back, sharp as ever. "How soon can you be in my office?" 20 minutes. I'll clear my morning. And Margaret, bring everything, every document, every recording, every piece of evidence you have. I'll bring it all, Thomas, and then we're going to war." I stood in my bedroom, looking at Robert's picture one more time. "I'm getting back up, my love. Watch me fight." Thomas Mitchell's office hadn't changed in 30 years. The same leather chairs, the same wall of law books, the same photograph of him shaking hands with the governor. But when I finished telling him everything, showing him every piece of evidence, his usually calm face transformed into something I'd never seen before. Cold, calculated fury. "Jennifer's made 3 critical mistakes," he said, organizing my documents into piles. "First, she's been sloppy with the embezzlement. These business credit lines she opened, the paper trail leads directly back to her personal accounts. She's been skimming for 2 years, Margaret. Small amounts at first, then increasingly bold. Nearly 800,000 total." He pulled out a ledger I hadn't even noticed. "Your bookkeeper flagged these discrepancies months ago, but Jennifer convinced David to fire her before she could report to you." The second mistake was even more damaging. Thomas had discovered that the medical evaluation claiming my cognitive decline was completely fraudulent. The doctor who'd supposedly examined me had lost his license 3 years ago. The clinic address was a vacant building in Detroit. "This isn't just fraud, Margaret. This is conspiracy, elder abuse, and interstate crime. The FBI will be very interested in this." But the third mistake was the one that would destroy her completely. "Your husband was smarter than anyone knew," Thomas said, pulling out documents from his old files. "Remember that trust he established in 1995? The one you both forgot about?" I shook my head, confused. "Robert transferred 60% of the business into an irrevocable trust with you as sole beneficiary. It was his insurance policy, he called it, in case anything ever happened to him. Jennifer's been planning to steal something you can't lose. You don't own 50% of the business, Margaret. You own 75%. We spent the next 3 weeks building our case meticulously. I wore a recording device to every interaction, perfectly legal in our state. Jennifer, confident in her victory, spoke freely. "Once you're settled in the home, we'll make sure you're comfortable," she cooed over coffee, while admitting on tape to already listing the family property with realtors. David, stressed and guilty, confessed to forging my signature for the family's protection while I recorded every word. Thomas hired a forensic accountant who traced every dollar Jennifer had stolen. finding offshore accounts in the Caymans and a secret property she'd purchased in Florida using company funds. We documented her meetings with competitors, her promises to employees, her lies to family members. A private investigator discovered she'd done this before to her first husband's elderly mother in California, though she'd escaped prosecution when the woman died unexpectedly. The masterpiece of our plan was the timing. The family's monthly dinner was in 4 days, the same dinner where Jennifer planned to announce my retirement and transition to assisted living. Every family member would be there, including Jennifer's parents, whom she'd invited to witness her triumph. Thomas would arrive after dinner with 2 FBI agents and a state prosecutor he'd been coordinating with. "She wants a public victory," Thomas said, reviewing our strategy one final time. "So we'll give her a public defeat. The documents are filed under seal. The moment she announces your retirement, we unseal everything. The arrests will happen in your dining room, in front of everyone she's trying to impress." "It seems cruel," I admitted, thinking of my grandchildren watching their parents arrested. Thomas looked at me over his glasses. "Margaret, she was going to lock you away to die. Cruel is what she planned. This is justice." The morning of the family dinner, I woke with the strange calm that comes after accepting battle. I prepared the meal like I had hundreds of times before. 2 turkeys, herb roasted and golden, my mother's cornbread stuffing, green beans with almonds, sweet potato casserole with the marshmallow topping the grandchildren loved. Every dish made with the same care, though this might be the last family dinner in this house. My hands were steady as I set the table with the good china, arranged the roses from my garden, polished Robert's silver until it gleamed. Jennifer arrived early, unusual for her, wearing a black dress that looked more suited for a funeral than Sunday dinner. How appropriate. "Let me help you, Margaret," she said, her smile sharp as she watched me move around my kitchen. She'd never offered to help before. "You must be exhausted doing all this cooking. Soon you won't have to worry about these big dinners anymore." The threat disguised as kindness hung in the air between us. "I enjoy cooking for my family," I replied, checking the turkey without looking at her. "Always have." She followed me around the kitchen like a predator waiting for weakness. "David and I have some wonderful news to share tonight. Changes that will benefit everyone, especially you." Her hand touched my shoulder, possessive, claiming territory already. "You're going to be so relieved, Margaret. We're taking such good care of you." The family arrived in waves. Michael first, his twins running straight to the dessert table to count how many pies I'd made. Sarah next, catching my eye with a worried look that I answered with the slightest nod. Everything was in place. She squeezed my hand as she passed, whispering, "I'm here, Mom. Whatever happens." The rest filtered in. Cousins, grandchildren, even Jennifer's parents, dressed formally like they were attending a corporate merger rather than Sunday dinner. David arrived last, his face gray with stress. He couldn't meet my eyes as he kissed my cheek, the Judas kiss that burned even though I expected it. "Hi, Mom," he mumbled, then quickly moved to Jennifer's side. She took his arm proprietarily, leading him to the head of the table, Robert's seat where she'd placed 2 folders, red folders like blood against my white tablecloth. Dinner progressed with unbearable normalcy. Conversations about school, work, the weather. Jennifer kept checking her phone, timing something. At 7:30 exactly, she stood, tapping her wine glass with a fork. The room fell silent. My heart pounded, but I kept my face serene, the grandmother enjoying her family gathering. "Before dessert," Jennifer began, her voice carrying the authority she'd practiced, "David and I have an important announcement about the future of the Thompson family and Thompson Construction." She picked up one of the red folders, holding it like a weapon. "Change is never easy, but sometimes it's necessary. Margaret has given so much to this family, and now it's time for us to give back to her." David stood beside her, his hands shaking slightly. The room watched, confused but interested. The grandchildren fidgeted, wanting pie, not speeches. I sat perfectly still, my phone in my lap showing Thomas's text, Outside. Ready when you are. Jennifer opened the folder, her smile triumphant. Margaret, this family loves you too much to watch you struggle with the burden of business any longer. The trap was set. The next words would spring it. Jennifer held the folder high, her voice carrying across the silent dining room. Margaret will be transitioning to a beautiful assisted living facility where she can receive the care she needs. David and I will be taking over Thompson Construction to preserve Robert's legacy for future generations. She pulled out a document, waving it like a victory flag. We've already made all the arrangements. The power of attorney has been... Thomas, please join us. My voice cut through her performance like a blade. The room turned as Thomas Mitchell entered from the kitchen, carrying his own red folder, followed by 2 FBI agents in dark suits and a woman I recognized as the state prosecutor. Jennifer's wineglass slipped from her hand, shattering against the hardwood floor, red wine spreading like blood across the wood. Thomas walked to the center of the room, his presence commanding immediate authority. He looked at Jennifer with the same expression I'd seen him use in court 30 years ago, destroying opposition witnesses. Mrs. Jennifer Thompson, you're being sued for embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy, and elder abuse. Federal agents have frozen your accounts in the Cayman Islands as of 3 o'clock this afternoon. He opened his folder, pulling out document after document. We have evidence of $800,000 stolen from Thompson Construction over 2 years. Jennifer's face went white. That's impossible. You can't prove your login credentials accessing the accounts, your signatures on the shell company documents, your emails to contractors promising kickbacks. Thomas never raised his voice, but each word hit like a hammer. Should I continue? Or would you prefer to hear about the fraudulent medical documents you created using a deceased doctor's credentials? David stumbled backward. What? Jennifer, what is he talking about? Thomas turned to my son, and for a moment his expression softened. Your wife has been planning to divorce you once she gained control of your mother's assets. We have emails between her and her sister discussing the timeline. You were never her partner, David. You were her mark. The FBI agent stepped forward. Jennifer Thompson, you're under arrest for interstate fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit elder abuse. The handcuffs clicked onto her wrists as the room erupted. Children crying, adults shouting, Jennifer's parents demanding explanations. But the biggest shock was still to come. Thomas raised his hand for silence. There's more. Margaret Thompson owns 75% of Thompson Construction through an irrevocable trust established by Robert Thompson in 1995. Any attempt to transfer ownership without her explicit notarized consent, witnessed by 3 parties, is legally impossible. He looked directly at Jennifer. You've spent 2 years planning to steal something that was never available to take. Jennifer's composure finally shattered. You old witch! You knew! You sat there and let me... The FBI agent guided her toward the door as she struggled. David, tell them. Tell them about her memory problems, her confusion. David stood frozen, tears streaming down his face as the truth crashed over him. Mom, I thought she showed me evidence. She said you were declining. She lied, David, Sarah said, standing beside me. She lied about everything, and you chose to believe her over our mother. The prosecutors gathered their evidence as Jennifer was led away, her designer heels clicking against the floor for the last time in my house. Her parents followed, her mother crying, her father threatening lawsuits. The room slowly emptied until only family remained, the shattered wine glass still glittering on the floor like scattered rubies. The weeks that followed felt like rebuilding after a hurricane. Jennifer was denied bail, deemed a flight risk due to her offshore accounts and the Florida property she'd hidden. She faced 15 years in federal prison, though her lawyer was pushing for a plea deal. I refused to support any reduction in charges. Some crimes don't deserve mercy. David came to see me 7 days after the dinner, looking like he'd aged 10 years. He sat in his father's chair, something he'd never dared do before, and broke down completely. "I destroyed everything, didn't I?" he sobbed. The successful lawyer reduced to the little boy who'd once cried over broken toys. "Dad would hate me. You should hate me." "I don't hate you, David," I said, surprising myself with the truth of it. "I'm disappointed beyond words. I'm hurt in ways that will never fully heal. But you're my son, and that doesn't change. What changes is your place in my life and business." I handed him the separation papers Thomas had drawn up. "You're removed from Thompson Construction permanently. Your shares will be held in trust for your children, accessible when they turn 30. You need to rebuild your life and career without the safety net we provided." He nodded, accepting the punishment without argument. "What about my kids? Will you still—" "They're innocent in this. They're welcome in my home always, but you'll need to earn your way back into this family, David. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. You have years of work ahead of you." Sarah took over as CEO of Thompson Construction, something Robert had actually suggested years ago, but I'd resisted, wanting to keep things equal between the children. She had the mind for it, the heart for it, and most importantly, the loyalty I'd taken for granted. Within 3 months, she'd not only stabilized the business, but expanded it, landing the contract for the new courthouse that Jennifer had been trying to sabotage. Michael surprised everyone by revealing he'd been recording Jennifer's manipulations for months, suspicious of her interest in the business finances. "I'm not smart like David or brave like Sarah," he said, "but I know a snake when I see one. I just wish I'd spoken up sooner." His evidence became crucial in the federal case, ensuring Jennifer couldn't wiggle out through legal technicalities. I sold the big house, not because Jennifer had planned to, but because it was time. The ghosts were too loud, the rooms too empty. I bought a smaller place near the lake with a perfect kitchen for teaching Emma and the other grandchildren to cook, and a garden where Robert's roses could bloom fresh. The old house became the new Thompson Construction headquarters, keeping it in the family but transforming its purpose. The grandchildren adapted with the resilience of youth. Emma became fiercely protective of me, understanding more than a 12-year-old should about betrayal and loyalty. The younger ones only knew that Aunt Jenny went away and Daddy was sad, but Grandma still made cookies and told stories. 6 months after that horrible dinner, I stood in my new garden, planting bulbs for spring. My phone rang. David, calling for our weekly check-in, part of his long journey toward redemption. Sarah was coming for dinner to discuss the new contracts. Michael's twins were spending the weekend. Life had scarred over, not healed, but continued. I was 78 years old. No, 68. I was 68 years old, and I was finally free. The morning I testified at Jennifer's sentencing was the last time I saw her. She sat in her orange jumpsuit, her perfect makeup replaced by dark circles, her designer nails now bare and bitten down. When our eyes met, I expected to see hatred or defiance. Instead, I saw nothing. Empty eyes in an empty person who'd spent so much time calculating the value of things, she'd never understood the worth of people. The judge gave her 12 years. As they led her away, she turned back once, and I saw a flicker of something. Maybe regret, maybe just regret, at getting caught. I'll never know, and I no longer care. That was 3 years ago. Today, Thompson Construction employs 73 families. Sarah has grown it into something Robert and I never imagined, expanding into sustainable building practices and community development projects. She named the new community center after her father, but insisted on adding Anne Margaret Thompson to the dedication plaque. "You both built this company, Mom. It's time everyone knew it." David works as a public defender now, making a third of his previous salary but finding something he'd lost along the way: purpose. He brings his children to Sunday dinners at my lake house, where we're slowly stitching our relationship back together with careful threads. He's earned the right to sit at my table again, though he always chooses a different chair than his father's. Some spaces remain sacred. Emma, now 15, recently told me she wants to be a lawyer like Uncle Thomas, not like Dad was before. She says it's to protect people who can't protect themselves. When she bakes with me now, she writes down not just recipes, but the stories that go with them. So I never forget what really matters, Grandma. Here's what I've learned in my 71 years. And yes, I know my real age now. No more confusion about that. Family isn't just blood. It's the people who stand by you when standing by you offers them nothing. Sarah and Michael earned their place as my children, not through birth, but through loyalty. The employees who testified on my behalf, the neighbors who offered support, Thomas who came out of retirement to fight for me, they're all family. Greed is a poison that makes people think they're being clever when they're actually being cruel. Jennifer thought she was smart, planning every detail, documenting every moment. But she failed to understand that wisdom and cunning aren't the same thing. Wisdom builds, cunning just manipulates. Wisdom creates legacy. Cunning creates schemes that crumble at the first touch of truth. The deepest betrayals often come wrapped in concern and care. "We're doing this for you" can be the most dangerous words you'll ever hear. Trust your instincts when someone's help feels like harm. Don't let anyone make you feel guilty for protecting what you've earned. Age brings experience, not incompetence. Gray hair means you've survived enough battles to recognize an enemy, even when they're smiling across your dinner table. Your time is never over until you decide it is. Jennifer was wrong about that, wrong about everything that mattered. So I ask you, what would you have done? If your own family conspired against you, would you have fought back or walked away? Would you have chosen justice or peace? And more importantly, who in your life deserves your trust, and who might be documenting your every stumble? Share your thoughts below. Like this story if it moved you. Subscribe to hear more about triumph over betrayal. And remember, sometimes the red folder holds salvation, not surrender.